En muchos estados de la Unión Americana, la marihuana ya es legal o para consumo en cualquier tipo de circunstancia o para usos medicinales. En algunos estados, de hecho, la experiencia ha sido muy interesante y vale la pena conocerla. Tengo en esta ocasión como invitado a Andrew Friedman. Él es director de coordinación de marihuana en el gobierno del estado de Colorado, un estado en el que la marihuana puede consumirse de manera legal. Vamos a hacer esta conversación en idioma inglés. Andrew Friedman, thank you very much for speaking with us.
It's my pleasure.
How long has Colorado have marijuana as a legal product?
You've been allowed to sell marijuana as a legal product since January of 2014.
What has been the experience? A lot of people were afraid that if you legalize marijuana in a state like Colorado, the consumption of marijuana was going to skyrocket. Has this happened?
So the answer is no. That in general, what we're finding is that it's the people who have used marijuana before are now using marijuana, youth and adults alike, at about the same rate that they were before. And so really, in the short term, what we've seen is it's just a much safer, healthier way to sell marijuana.
Has criminality been reduced?
No, there hasn't been an effect. We're certainly arresting fewer people for marijuana-related offenses, but other offenses, there's been really no push or pull either way for more or less crime in Colorado.
What does marijuana czar like you actually do in the state of Colorado?
Well, there's a lot that has to happen the second that voters decide to legalize recreational marijuana. We had to set up a highly regulated industry, more regulated than alcohol or tobacco, and while it's still federally illegal, track every plant from seed to sale and make sure that it's going over to people over the age of 21 in limited amounts. And we had to get that up and running in a year. And so I oversaw the regulatory aspect, I oversaw the policy aspects, communications, how to put out a youth prevention campaign to make sure that we don't see more youth using marijuana, really thinking about it from 10 different angles so that we make sure that we can do this but maintain public safety and public health and keep it out of the hands of children.
What's the youth prevention program like?
So I think we've learned some lessons from the past, and so what we do is we really try to meet youth where they are. And so our public education campaign is about establishing what goals youth have and asking them to think about whether or not marijuana is really a part of that. So if you want to get your first job, or you want to get your driver's license, or get a date to prom, is marijuana really going to help you achieve those goals? We also put behavioral health specialists in schools so that they can recognize and screen for at-risk kids and really get them the help they need early rather than waiting till they fall into a cycle of drug abuse.
What are the rules for the use of marijuana?
So it's a lot of them are rules we found from alcohol and tobacco. So you have to be over the age of 21. You can only purchase
21, not 18.
21, not 18. You have to purchase. You can only purchase up to an ounce. You cannot smoke it in an open and public forum, and so you can only use it in private. That means you can't do it in your car. You can't do it in commercial space. You can only do it at your house.
If you do it in your car, can you get arrested?
More likely you'll get a fine, but if you do it in your car and you're driving, you can get a driving while high ticket, and that's just like a driving while drunk ticket.
Okay, so there's a restriction. You can't drive and while you're on the influence of under the influence of marijuana.
Yeah, and it's less exact than it is for alcohol. The technology is not quite there yet, so our police officers both have to notice that you're intoxicated and give you a roadside sobriety test, but as well as they take some blood and they see how many what's called nanograms of THC are in your blood.
Is there any statistic as to whether consumption has increased, especially among the young?
So we do a survey that's 17,000 kids. We do it every 2 years. And we just ask them in an anonymous survey, have you ever used in your lifetime, and have you used in the last 30 days? And since legalization, we've seen no change across the board for lifetime use or 30-day use of marijuana. Roughly 4 out of 5 kids are not using marijuana on a regular basis in our high schools.
Is there any relationship between the consumption of alcohol and the consumption of marijuana?
It's a great question, and I will say I don't think we have the answer to that yet. We don't know whether or not it's a supplement or a complement for alcohol, tobacco, hard drugs. We simply don't have enough data to know that yet.
So you don't know either whether the use of marijuana will lead to harder drugs.
We have no evidence that suggests it will, but we don't have conclusive evidence that says it won't.
Now, the biggest fear was that once it was legal, all the kids were going to be smoking marijuana all over the place. That hasn't happened in Colorado.
No, and there are things to worry about. I mean, over the long-term time, we worry about advertising and.
Is there advertising right now?
There is advertising, but it's very limited, and we worry that they'll try to push those boundaries as they start to capture more and more of the market. The industry might want to try to get kids addicted younger, just like tobacco did in the 70s, 80s. And so we do worry about those things, but so far we have not seen an increase in youth consumption.
Do you keep track of tobacco consumption as well, and has it been dropping as it's happened, for example, in Mexico?
We keep track of youth consumption of tobacco, and that has been dropping quite considerably.
Is this a consequence of also educational programs?
I think it is. I think we've gotten better at talking to people about the public health consequences of using tobacco, using alcohol, using marijuana, and I think we have less of a talking down to kids and telling them what they're doing is wrong. And we've gotten a lot better at meeting them where they are and talking to them about what their goals are or why they might be in a difficult position, and trying to help them through that.
Consumption of marijuana is not as big in Mexico as it is in the United States, but we are concerned with the fact that a lot of teenagers are using marijuana in Mexico. Are you going to the schools? Are you going to high schools to talk to kids? And what is the response you're getting?
So what we do is we've put a lot of our resources that we get from marijuana tax revenue, we put it into behavioral health specialists in schools who are specifically designed to screen for high-risk kids who might engage in marijuana use. And again, the initial reports coming back at us is that it hasn't changed much. It's still a problem in schools, but that it hasn't changed much since legalization.
What's the situation? You have marijuana continues to be banned by the federal government, but it's legal in some states like Colorado.
Yeah.
What's the legal status for someone who decides to use marijuana or to commercialize marijuana?
Yeah, it's very tenuous. It's very tricky. Technically, it's all a federal felony, what they're doing.
Is anyone arresting people on felony charges and federal charges in Colorado?
Not if we meet certain criteria that the federal government has put forward, saying if you're doing it in a very responsible manner, we're going to choose not to use our resources to arrest you.
How did you end up being the director of a coordination of marijuana in Colorado? Who chose you, and what sort of professional requirements did you meet?
Yeah. So I had absolutely nothing to do with the legalization of marijuana, nor did I weigh in on the debate. I graduated Harvard Law School in 2010, and I was the Lieutenant Governor's Chief of Staff.
So you're a lawyer.
Yep. And the governor approached me after the legalization of marijuana, mainly because he wanted somebody who was kind of agnostic towards the issue, but cared a lot about
So you didn't have a position, a personal position?
No, and I try very hard to maintain, while I now have a personal position, my outward persona, I try very hard to maintain kind of neutrality when it comes to
What is Andrew Friedman's personal position?
I don't share Andrew Friedman's personal position.
No, I mean, you have to be a public official, and that's your job.
And I have to meet with people who are pretty angry that this happened. So, and I have to meet with people that
What do you tell them? What do you tell people who are angry about the legalization of marijuana?
Well, I try to meet them. I try to ask what they're so angry about. So if you're angry about youth use, there's a lot of things we can work on together. We can work on advertising restrictions. We can work on edibles was a big problem, that they looked like gummy bears, and there are a lot of missions we can work together. If you're so mad you want to overturn the legalization of marijuana, I tell you that's not my job, and I don't do that.
So in order to marijuana to be banned again, you would have to have another referendum, am I right?
A vote
another
of the
vote,
people.
yeah.
Yep.
And that's not likely right now?
It remains as popular as it was when it passed.
Have public opinion polls changed? Is it more popular, less popular than it used to be?
It's about as popular, but people against it are going down. And so it's, with the last election cycle, it passed in 4 new states. Everything that was kind of anti-marijuana legalization on the ballot in Colorado didn't pass. And so we're seeing it, I think, gain a lot of political momentum.
There's a big debate in Mexico as to whether we should legalize marijuana, especially because we're facing a major violence situation, and it is actually a lot of people blame the drug cartels for that. What would you tell Mexicans? What do we have to consider if we really want to make a decision on a properly on a proper basis, on a reasonable basis?
Yeah. So that's why the Aspen Institute invited me down here was to have that discussion. And what I do is I share both the facts. You know, there are public health concerns. We're seeing things like hospitalization rates go up, but there are a lot of things that are coming
For what sort of illnesses?
For people mainly overdosing on edibles, for them eating too many marijuana cookies and having a bad night. So we tell them, first of all, here are the things that we've seen and lessons learned, but mainly the debate comes down to what are you trying to achieve? And if you're trying to achieve kind of better criminal justice elements, then I don't think you have to adopt the Colorado model full scale. You could have a limited government model. You could have a very limited commercial model. And there's a lot of different ways to look at this. And so I mainly challenge people to think about what exactly do you want to achieve? And are you sure you have the best ways to do that? How are you even going to measure if you achieve those things?
What's the legal situation across the U.S.? How many states have legalized marijuana for recreational purposes, and how many have done so for medical purposes?
So we have 8 states that have legalized for recreational purposes, of which only really 2 have gotten them up and running, and that's Colorado and Washington. We have 28 states with medical marijuana at this point.
Are you concerned about the fact that a state as big as California will have legalized marijuana very soon?
I'm not concerned, no. I think it's going to be very complicated. As far as the market goes for Colorado, they're pretty insular from each other. You're not allowed to sell marijuana across a border at this point. And so it probably won't have that big of a commercial impact on us. But what I'm looking forward to for California is we need to lobby the federal government in a lot of issues. We need to get banking, because we don't have banking for marijuana right now. We need to get the proper research done so that we know the medicinal value of marijuana and we know the public health harms of marijuana, because the United States has not been doing research on marijuana for the last 50 years. And so,
are there true medical purposes for marijuana? Can marijuana actually help you? I mean, I know I've heard a lot of stories, but do we really have evidence that marijuana can help in some illnesses?
We don't have solid evidence, but that's mainly because the federal government hasn't allowed us to get solid evidence. I've seen some what I consider to be, and I had no buy-in about whether or not medicinal marijuana was a real thing, but I've seen kids in very dire situations who have been helped by medical marijuana, and I've seen really the elderly use marijuana as pain medication that seems to work a lot better for them than, say, 3 glasses of wine at night in order to sleep. And so I certainly have seen it help people, but we do not yet have rigorous scientific studies that prove the extent to which it helps people.
Andrew, how old are you?
Yeah, I get this all the time.
Yeah, I'm sorry to ask.
I know. I'm 33.
33.
I've been told many times that I have a baby face, but I'm young for this position.
Well, you're 33, and what did you tell them when they asked you to be the Colorado marijuana czar?
I thought it would be a long road for my mother to get over. So
yeah.
What I tell everybody is when I was Lieutenant Governor's Chief of Staff, my mom was very proud, and she went and told everybody that her son was Lieutenant Governor's Chief of Staff, and now that I'm the world's first marijuana czar, she tells everybody that I'm the Lieutenant Governor's Chief of Staff, and so it's just a hard road for everybody to get through, I guess.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Do you think it's prejudice? Do you think there are well-founded reasons for your mother's concern?
I think that certainly I'm in a very divisive space. Now, I don't think I'm there to advocate for legalization or to detract from legalization. I think this is the exact kind of place that good government should be, that if we do this right, it could be a game changer, and if we do it wrong, it could really hurt Colorado.
So you're a regulator, and you want to do your job well.
Yeah, and I think it matters if we do this well, and I hope to do it well.
Andrew Friedman, thank you very much for speaking.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Y a usted, amigo televidente, que hace posible este programa, se lo agradezco también. Esto es todo por hoy, pero no se le olvide. Nos vemos la próxima.